There comes a point when you realize that being emotionally available to the wrong person is costing you far too much. You're constantly analyzing his words, waiting for replies, trying to read between the lines. But here's the truth. If someone leaves you guessing, they're already giving you an answer. Emotional clarity is not found in chasing. It's found in stepping back. When a man treats you like an afterthought, your silence becomes your loudest response. Detaching emotionally isn't about playing games, it's about protecting your heart. It's a conscious decision to stop pouring energy into someone who keeps showing you they aren't ready to match it. You don't need to punish him, you need to free yourself. And the freedom starts the moment you delete him emotionally, not physically, but where it counts the most, in your heart. You've probably been told that cutting someone off emotionally is cold or harsh, but it's actually the opposite. It's warmth turned inward. It's taking all that love and attention you gave to someone else and redirecting it toward your own healing. Because here's what no one tells you: staying emotionally tied to someone who's inconsistent slowly chips away at your self-worth. It teaches you to settle, it convinces you that breadcrumbs are a meal, and eventually you begin to doubt your own instincts, blaming yourself for wanting more. But you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. When you delete him emotionally, you stop asking and start deciding. You choose peace over potential. The real challenge is not walking away physically. It's detaching from the fantasy you created in your mind. Emotional ties often linger because we're not grieving the person. We're grieving the version of them we imagined. You weren't holding on to him. You were holding on to hope. Hope that one day he'd wake up, chase you, fight for you. But how many days passed where he didn't? How many messages did you write and delete, waiting for the right moment to be chosen? When you emotionally delete someone, you stop waiting for a breakthrough and you start creating closure. Not the kind he gives you, but the kind you give yourself, through strength, silence, and self-respect. And here's the thing. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you finally started caring about yourself more. When you delete him emotionally, you stop prioritizing his potential and start honoring your needs. You stop reacting to his inconsistency and start responding to your inner peace. You no longer get pulled into the emotional roller coaster because you've stepped off the ride. You see the red flags, and instead of justifying them, you walk away with grace. You let go of the need to be understood by someone who never truly saw you. You no longer need him to change. You just need to change the access he has to your emotions. And in doing so, you give yourself the closure he never could. The beauty of emotional detachment is that it creates space. Not just space from him, but space for you, space to heal, space to rediscover the parts of you that dimmed while waiting for someone else to value them. When your heart is no longer consumed by confusion, you start hearing your own voice again. You become more present in your life, more grounded, more powerful. You're no longer anxious about his next move because you've made yours. And in that space, you stop feeling powerless. Because truthfully, you were never powerless. You were just emotionally invested in someone who wasn't invested in you. But now that you've reclaimed that energy, your power is undeniable. Most people think detachment means you're done forever, but that's not the point. Emotional detachment is about reclaiming control of your thoughts, your focus, your worth. It's a way of saying, I'm no longer handing my emotions over to someone who doesn't handle them with care. And ironically, this is when people start noticing your absence, because your energy is no longer reaching them. Your softness is no longer available to them. Your loyalty, which they took for granted, now feels like a missing piece. That silence becomes a mirror, and whether they come back or not, they will feel what they lost. But here's the secret most people never realize. It's not the detachment that makes them come back, it's who you become after detaching. You become the woman who no longer tolerates inconsistency, the woman who doesn't beg for love or chase breadcrumbs, the woman who is so emotionally full that she no longer seeks from a place of lack. And that energy is magnetic. You're no longer trying to prove your worth because you live it. And when someone sees you standing in that power, they either rise to meet you or watch you walk away, and either way, you win. There is something incredibly powerful about being emotionally unavailable to someone who once made you question your value. It sends a message: you don't get to come and go from my life like it's a revolving door. Emotional detachment is your boundary in action. It's the invisible wall that says, this is as close as you can get without consistency, effort, and respect. And suddenly, the same person who once ignored your worth starts to chase it. Not because you played a game, but because you changed the rules. You no longer play on their terms. You've created a new standard, and now it's up to them to meet it or leave. We often believe that emotional detachment means we've given up, but it's the opposite. It means we've chosen ourselves. And choosing yourself in a world that encourages you to stay emotionally loyal to someone who isn't loyal to you, that's strength, that's courage. It's looking at the situation and saying, this no longer serves me, and walking away even when your heart still whispers what ifs. Because you've learned that your heart deserves more than confusion, it deserves clarity, and clarity starts when you remove your emotions from people who don't honor them. That's not weakness, that's emotional mastery. That's real self-love, and as you move forward, there will be moments when you're tempted to check in, to reach out, to go back. That's normal, but in those moments, remember this: you didn't emotionally detach because you stopped caring. You detached because you started caring the right way, by protecting your peace. Letting go isn't forgetting, it's remembering who you are when you're not wrapped up in someone else's indecision. You no longer sit around waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself, and that's what creates real transformation. Not the kind you post online, but the quiet internal shift that changes the way you love forever. One of the most misunderstood principles in dating is this: when someone always has access to you, they rarely value that access. Think about anything in life. What's consistently available is often taken for granted. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about understanding the psychology of value. People feel the weight of your presence more when it's suddenly no longer there. Constant communication, chasing, explaining. None of that increases desire. What increases desire is space, real space. Not the kind where you disappear just to make them miss you, but the kind where you truly move your focus inward. That kind of silence forces someone to confront what they've lost. It's not your job to teach someone to appreciate you while you're still bleeding for them emotionally. The more you explain, the less they feel. The more available you are, the less they reflect. Why? Because your energy is filling the silence. Your reassurance is cushioning their ego. When you delete him emotionally, you stop giving him that emotional safety net. Now he's left with his own thoughts, and suddenly the quiet gets loud. The absence begins to echo. It's in that silence that realization grows, and if he genuinely cares, he'll feel it. But this time, it won't be on your terms. People don't change when they feel comfortable. They change when they feel the discomfort of losing something valuable. If you're always emotionally checking in, trying to stay in his life somehow, he never has to feel the cost of losing you. He gets the best of you without the commitment. And deep down, you know this isn't fair. It's exhausting giving to someone who only takes when it's convenient. But the moment you go silent, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, you change everything. Suddenly, he's no longer in control of the rhythm. You've interrupted the pattern, and that's where his desire to reconnect often begins. But here's the key: it has to be real. You can't pretend to move on while secretly hoping he notices. That's not detachment, that's manipulation, and it never works long term. He'll feel the difference. He can sense if you're just waiting behind your silence for him to come running. But when you emotionally delete him from your heart space, you create genuine distance. You stop checking his socials, you stop wondering what he's thinking, you stop performing for his attention, you no longer exist in his orbit because your energy has fully returned to yourself, and ironically, that's when he starts searching for your light. It's uncomfortable to withdraw when you're used to overgiving. You want to reach out, you want to explain, but here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you insert yourself, the less time he has to miss you. You're interrupting the process of emotional clarity, his clarity, and clarity doesn't happen when you're available 24/7. It happens when your presence becomes a memory, not a guarantee, when he can no longer rely on your emotional labor to feel wanted. When he realizes that you were the one giving meaning to the connection all along, and in that gap, he finally has to ask himself, what did I just lose? You must understand your absence carries weight, but only when you're no longer performing emotional maintenance in the relationship. That means no just checking in texts, no late night vulnerability, no Instagram stories designed to get his attention. All of that keeps you tied to his energy. The real shift happens when you stop making him a priority in your emotional world, when your silence isn't loud with manipulation, but calm with acceptance. That's the difference between a reaction and a response. You're not punishing him, you're prioritizing peace. And trust me, peace is powerful because it's rare. In that space of peace, he's left with something most people run from: himself, his thoughts, his patterns, his regrets, the things he couldn't see clearly when you were always emotionally available. Because before, he could tune you out, knowing you'd still be there. Now, your silence demands attention. He starts wondering where you went, why you stopped caring, and most of all, whether he was actually worth what he lost. This is where accountability begins, not through your words, but through your absence, and that's more effective than any speech you could have given. This is not about waiting for him to return, it's about you no longer needing him to. When you emotionally detach, your world starts to shift. You begin investing in yourself, focusing on your dreams, healing your wounds. And suddenly, the emotional space he once occupied is now filled with purpose. The pain doesn't disappear overnight, but it gets repurposed. You build something with the love you were giving him, and people feel that shift. He'll feel that shift because you're no longer broadcasting a signal of longing. You're radiating strength, and that frequency is undeniable. The truth is, most men don't expect you to really leave emotionally. They think you'll always be available, always hoping, always chasing. They get used to your patterns, but when you stop reaching out, not to provoke a response, but because you're genuinely moving on, it hits different. He realizes that the emotional safety net he took for granted is gone, that the emotional labor you once offered freely is no longer up for grabs, that you weren't needy, you were just loyal. And now that your loyalty has a boundary, he's left with nothing but the memory of it. This is why absence only works when it's rooted in authenticity, when you've emotionally deleted him, not to prove a point, but because you're honoring your worth. It creates a ripple effect. People feel the loss of real energy. Not forced silence, not staged indifference, but a calm, confident withdrawal that says, I love me more than I fear losing you. That's the energy that turns tables. That's the energy that shifts power, not by force, but by emotional alignment. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer chasing. You're just choosing peace. And sometimes that's what makes them run back faster than anything else. There's something powerful that happens the moment you stop making him the center of your emotional world. When you finally shift your focus back to yourself, everything begins to change, not because he changed, but because your energy did. You're no longer waiting to be seen. You're no longer begging to be understood. You start asking yourself what you want instead of what he needs. This is when the power shifts, not in a game playing way, but in a soul-level awakening, because now you're no longer trying to convince someone to love you. You're showing up for yourself in a way no one else ever could. You begin to realize how much energy you spent trying to decode mixed signals and half-effort affection. You gave so much mental space to someone who wasn't even sure how he felt about you. But the second you redirected that energy inward, everything came into focus. You saw how the confusion you felt wasn't love. It was emotional chaos, and clarity only comes when you stop asking someone to validate your worth. Instead, you start validating yourself. Your focus becomes your own growth, your own dreams, your own peace. You no longer chase the person. You chase the life you deserve. It's not that you stop caring. It's that you stop centering your identity around whether he cares. You begin to notice the beauty in the silence. You see that when you stop feeding a one-sided connection, you start healing. Your days become about progress, not pain. Your nights are no longer filled with questions. You're not wondering what he's doing. You're wondering how you ever lost yourself in the first place. And that's a powerful moment, because from there, your confidence grows. And confidence doesn't beg, it attracts, because your attention is no longer a reaction, it's a reward. This internal shift doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you magnetic. When a woman is focused, calm, and at peace with herself, it radiates. She walks differently, she speaks with intention. She's no longer emotionally starving, hoping for crumbs of validation. She knows her worth and she lives it, not loudly but unapologetically. That kind of presence can't be faked. It can't be forced, and when a man feels that shift, it's like waking up. He sees the woman he used to have access to now thriving without him, and it shakes him, because he starts to realize he wasn't the source of her power. The truth is, when you're stuck in emotional neediness, you can't see clearly. Your judgment is clouded by your desire to be chosen. You ignore red flags, you settle for almosts. But when you focus on growth, something flips. You're no longer waiting for someone to finally get it. You've already gotten it yourself. You understand that your time, your love, your heart, they are valuable, and anyone who gets access to you needs to rise to that level. You don't make exceptions for confusion. You don't settle for someone's potential. You respond only to consistency and effort. It's amazing how much changes when you start showing up differently. You no longer reply immediately to every message, not out of pride, but because you're genuinely busy living. You're no longer obsessing over his social media. You're out creating real moments in your own life. You're not refreshing your phone. You're refreshing your soul. And that shift creates distance, not just physically, but emotionally. He feels it. The lack of access, the calm detachment, the grounded presence, it's unfamiliar, and people are drawn to what feels scarce, especially when it's something they used to take for granted. You also stop explaining yourself. You stop over-explaining your feelings. You stop trying to make him understand your worth, because suddenly it's not about proving anything to him. It's about being aligned with yourself. If someone can't see your value without a monologue, they were never ready. And when you understand that, your emotional energy stops leaking. You stop investing in conversations that go nowhere. You stop initiating where there's no reciprocation. And without even realizing it, you've raised your standards simply by focusing on your peace. And peace becomes the new requirement, not just for him, but for everyone. In this shift, something else beautiful happens. You become emotionally self-sufficient. You realize you don't need someone to make you feel worthy. You already are, and that realization changes everything. You no longer look to him for happiness. You build your own. You no longer wait for his effort. You surround yourself with people who already show up, and in doing so, you create a life that's full. So full that anyone trying to come back has to add value or they don't fit in. That's not being closed off, it's being selective. And your emotional freedom depends on that discernment. Now you understand that true connection doesn't come from attachment. It comes from alignment. You want someone who meets you where you are, not someone you have to chase down and explain how to love you. And that alignment begins with you being emotionally grounded. No more highs and lows. No more chaos disguised as passion. Just calm clarity. And clarity is powerful. It allows you to see who belongs in your life and who just likes the way your energy feels without giving anything in return. And from that space, you make better choices, empowered choices. This is what real power looks like. Not in how loud you can be, but in how still you can remain. You're not performing, you're not proving. You're just being. You're not emotionally activated by every little thing he does, because you've finally realized he doesn't control your emotions. You do. And once you take that control back, the game changes. You're no longer reactive. You're intentional. You're not afraid of losing him because you've found you. And that's the shift that makes him realize the woman he once had access to now lives in a world he has to earn his way back into. When you emotionally delete someone, you stop feeding the illusion that they can come and go from your life without consequence. You no longer play the role of the emotionally available placeholder, waiting to be picked. You set a boundary, not out of anger, but out of clarity. That clarity becomes a mirror. It forces him to look at what he's actually lost, not what he assumed would always be there. When someone realizes they no longer have emotional control over you, it shakes them. It removes their comfort zone, because now your absence means something. It's no longer a bluff, it's real. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you never cared. It means you care enough about yourself to stop tolerating emotional inconsistency. You no longer allow someone's indecision to define your identity. You stop reacting to breadcrumbs of affection. You stop hoping for change that only ever existed in your imagination. This isn't coldness, it's self-preservation. You step back not to create drama, but to create healing. And healing doesn't happen when you're still clinging to someone who can't meet you. Healing happens in the stillness, in the silence, in the choosing of yourself over their confusion. He may not notice your worth while he still has unlimited access to it, but when that access is gone, when the emotional energy you once gave freely disappears, reality hits. People don't miss you because you explain your value. They miss you because they feel the vacuum left behind when your energy is no longer filling their emotional gaps. The good morning texts stop. The emotional check-ins end. The heart that once showed up daily is suddenly quiet. That silence, it gets loud in his world, and in that quiet, he starts to confront what he took for granted. When you stop chasing, something powerful happens. He has to come to terms with what he contributed. Or more accurately, what he didn't, and that realization stings. Because now he sees how much effort you put into keeping the connection alive while he coasted. He sees that the relationship didn't fall apart because you didn't care, it fell apart because he never truly showed up. And this clarity doesn't come from your words. It comes from your absence. You removed the noise, you created a clean break, and now all that remains is reflection. And reflection for him is unfamiliar territory. There's something deeply unsettling for a man who thought he had emotional access to you forever. When he realizes he can no longer push your buttons, provoke a response, or trigger a conversation, he loses control. Not because you're playing games, but because you stopped playing his. You've unplugged from the dynamic. You've reclaimed your emotional energy, and that removal is more powerful than any confrontation. Because confrontation gives him attention, but silence gives him consequence. He has to sit with the emptiness where your presence used to be, and in that stillness, he begins to feel the weight of his inaction. Suddenly, he starts remembering things, the way you made him feel seen when no one else did. The emotional availability he always dismissed as too much now feels like a luxury he no longer has. The affection he once found predictable now feels precious. Because distance has a way of clarifying what closeness often obscures. You don't have to remind him of your worth. Your absence does that for you. The space you created becomes the stage for realization. And what was once ignored becomes deeply missed. This is how emotional detachment reverses the dynamic. It's not about making him suffer. It's about no longer making yourself suffer to keep the illusion of connection alive. You stop sacrificing your peace to chase someone's potential. You stop trading your intuition for hope. You let go of the fantasy and embrace the reality. If someone wanted to keep you, they would have made the effort before you walked away. And because you know this now, you hold your head higher, you move differently, you don't retaliate, you realign, and that alignment makes him see you in a new light, a light he didn't notice when he assumed you'd never leave. This emotional strength is not something most men are prepared for. They're used to a version of you that over-explains, over-gives, and over-loves. But now you underreact, you protect your peace. You keep your standards without needing to make a scene. He doesn't get to watch you fall apart, because you're not broken anymore, you're centered, you're grounded, you're focused on your life, not his attention. And that's when regret creeps in. Regret lives in the quiet. It builds when a man sees the evolution of a woman he didn't value enough. You don't block him out of bitterness. You simply stop letting him rent space in your emotional world. That world is sacred now. It's reserved for people who show up, who choose you clearly, not conditionally. And this is the true essence of emotional deletion, the decision to no longer carry someone who refuses to walk beside you. You're not bitter. You're not resentful. You're just done negotiating with someone who only showed up when it was convenient. That kind of peace can't be shaken. And when he finally reaches out, he's not just meeting the old you. He's meeting the version of you that no longer needs him. By the time he realizes what he lost, you've already built a life that doesn't have room for confusion. You're not looking over your shoulder. You're not secretly hoping. You're walking forward. Your energy has shifted. Your heart has healed. You're in love with your own life, and whether he returns or not, you've already won. Because the real comeback wasn't his, it was yours. And the moment you deleted him emotionally, you made space for something greater, your own power, your own peace, and your own possibility.